Good morning everyone, we are from group 3 and we will presenting our presentation about discourse and gender.
The linguistic forms used by men and women contrast to different degrees in all speech communities. It is claimed that men's speech was seen as logical, concise, and dealing with important topics, whereas women's speech was rated as emotional, flowery, confused, and wordy. Language and Women's Place by Robin Lakoff marks the start of a coherent field of language and gender research. Lakoff's central argument that men use language to dominate women was criticized for making overgeneralization and extrapolating conclusions based on observation of a small sample. But because of this, her book has inspired investigation of similar studies. Furthermore, a well-known sociologist, Deborah Tannen, stated that men and women use language differently, whether due to socialization or other reasons. Since the 1990s, there has been some thought that men and women use language in different settings. This kind of thinking has helped formulate research questions that focus more on how language use help to create, reflect, and challenge discourse around gender. Discourse has become the most influential concept in the field of language and gender in the last 20 years. Language has become a major concern among social scientists. Cameroon stated that over a decade, linguistic turn was mainly a turn to discourse analysis. This is evidenced by an analysis which states that 25 papers published around 2007 till 2009, especially those discussing gender and language, 80% of these papers mention the term discourse. The popularity of this approach has produced competing varieties of feminist discourse analysis based on what seem at times to be incommensurable assumptions and definitions of the term discourse. Since the 1950s, an increasing use of the term gender has been seen in the academic literature and the public discourse for distinguishing gender identity from biological sex. Term gender can be defined as what a person says or does to reveal that he or she has the status of being boy or girl, man or woman, masculinity or femininity of a person. Some gender and language studies have used discourse in a mainly neutral, descriptive way which approximates terms like genre, register, or text type. For example, women's discourse, advertising discourse, homophobic discourse, and coming out discourse. Theories of gender in discourse. One of the ways that discourse tends to be referred to most frequently in current writing in the field is through the term gendered discourse. Gendered discourse, according to Jane Sunderland is approach which is focused on identifying gendered discourse via traces in language use. Her research concentrated on language and gender in the representation of gender and sexuality in children's picture books and in language textbooks, or gender and sexuality in the language classroom. Another Sunderland approach is in identifying the relationship between discourse. For example, showing that two discourses may compete or support each other, or one may be dominant and the other subordinate. Related to Sunderland's approach is FCDA, or Feminist Critical Discourse Analysis, stated by Lazar. It aims to analyze the relationship between gender and language, which mostly means examining enactment of power by men and women in the public domain. FCDA criticizes the way in which language fosters unequal gender relations for purposes of emancipation and transformation. The third approach, offered by Judith Baxter, puts negotiation at the center of it. Baxter's FPDA suggests to analyzing spoken interaction that focuses on the ways in which speakers negotiate their subject position within competing and interwoven discourses. It does not have an emancipatory agenda for a woman, but a transformative one. So, it aims to provide a place for minorities and oppressed or women to voice their opinions. Discourse-oriented approach to gender and language research also found in discursive psychology. Discursive psychologists claim that gender is constructed in and through discourse. Discursive psychology highlights the way people construct the world, the selfish, through interaction, including conversation analysis or CA. This has led to the finding that conversation analysis can also be used for feminist research, because it can be able to show how gender or sexuality or power or oppression is produced in interaction. From the approaches above, it shows that discourse is always placed at the center of research, even though each approach has different objective or method of obtaining data.
A sample study. A cougar is a wild, solitary mammal native to the Americas. The term has recently begun to be used to describe women. It has become widely known since 2009. For example, from a website of Valerie Gibson, she is the new breed of single, older woman, confident, sophisticated, desirable, and sexy. She knows exactly what she wants. What she wants is younger men and lots of great sex. What she doesn't want is children, cohabitation, or commitment. It is an irresistible combination for younger men who are more than willing to meet this sleek and sexy single woman. So if you are a cougar at any age, get ready to find out how to meet, catch, and enjoy the perfect younger man and make them and you purr with pleasure. In many ways, this description could be characterized as positive. Cougars are described with the adjectives confident, sophisticated, desirable, sleek, irresistible, and sexy. The fact that cougars do not want children, cohabitation, or commitment is not viewed by the author as problematic, but instead presented as part of the reason why such women are irresistible. Gibson therefore redefines the concept of the older woman who has relationships with younger men as an empowered identity, eschewing conservative discourses that women should want commitment and children. In the data, there are a lot of texts which have cougar terms that refer to cars, sport teams, places, or people, but there are also several texts which refer to describe women. But of course, there are some negative and positive texts about describing women as a cougar. In addition, there is potentially more than one way that a discourse can be positive or negative.
An initial analysis may want to focus on linguistic markers in the text, particularly asking a question like how are cougars represented via language. Most readers would probably immediately notice the string of positive-sounding adjectives that used to describe cougars, such as strong, independent, intelligent, witty, fun, and charming. This is coupled with the assertion that cougar women are on the increase, with the implication that because this is a popular phenomenon, and one initially associated with glamorous, trendsetting Hollywood actresses, that is must be a good one. The discussion also acknowledges less explicitly that the positive discourses they are creating around cougars are in opposition to something else, possibly more negative. In line 1, the interviewer asks, "What is in the cougar?" and answers her own question, "Well, it is not exactly what you think." And in line 3, the same speaker refers to how women in their 40s and 50s are challenging the way we think about older women. Here there is a presupposition that there is a way we have of thinking about older women, which is implied to need challenging. Thus, one of the characteristics of the positive discourse of cougars is that it is constructed as already oppositional to a negative discourse about older women, the implication being that older women have not normally been characterized as strong, independent, fun, and so on. Such a discourse is thus positive. However, it could be argued that as the interview continues, the discourse moves away from a view of cougars as strong and independent, and instead draws on a third discourse which positions the cougar as obsessed with physical appearance and fashion based on line 4. In this sense, it is by dressing in trendy clothes, wearing makeup, and silver heels that the cougar became empowered, which results in them being noticed by younger men. Line 5. From feminist perspective, this could be argued as being problematic. The cougar is implied to be a sexual competitor with younger women, but also a somewhat passive one, not how it is younger men who are shown to be agents in line 5. They are the ones who are taking notice and going after the mature women who are take the more passive object position. The text also positions men in different ways. Younger men are constructed based on line 5 up to 6 as desirable, whereas older men are described in the opposition more negatively as tired, stuck in their ways, and not very flexible. Thus, while women are able to escape the problems associated with old age, the latter part of the interview seemed to confirm aspects of the original older discourse, that youth is attractive and being old is not. Interestingly, then, while this text appears on the surface to be offering an empowered view of older women, there are some conflicting or ambivalent aspects to it. What aspects of this text would the different forms of discourse analysis described above focus on, and what conclusion would they reach? A feminist critical discourse analyst might emphasize the subtle gender hierarchy that seems to be implied in the text. Young men appear to be placed at the top as they are viewed as physically desirable but also the ones who have the agency to pursue others. Cougars, while farmed as attractive, are somewhat further down the hierarchy. They must work at being desirable by following fashions and even then become objects of desire rather than the more active participants. Finally, older men are at the bottom of the hierarchy, being constructed as unacceptable partners. The term cougar, originating in North America, is clearly a very Western conceptualization of female sexuality. What would discourse analysts from other cultures notice about the text, which I, as gay, male, middle class, liberal, 30-something Westerner, might have missed? Other analysts might, for example, focus on the heteronormative aspects of the text, which in its discussion of male-female relationships seems to ignore the existence of same-sex desire and how that might relate to other women. For example, in line 6, the speaker seems to imply the women only ever consider men as partners. Alternatively, taking Sunderland's gender discourses approach, we might want to focus on giving specific names to the gender discourses that the text seems to refer to. For example, older women can be attractive, older men as tired or inflexible, men, chase, women allure. Women must dress to please, noting the relationships or conflicts between such discourses and how they might relate to more general, higher order gendered discourses such as gender differences or potential non-gendered discourses in the text such as youth is desirable or Hollywood leads society.
Future directions. The field of gender and language is always changing, often in response to the ways the societies frame gender relations. As sexist discourses grow more subtle, discourse-based approaches must also develop. While most feminist researchers wish to inspire social change for the better, some take positions which focus more on improving the situation for women or other groups who are viewed as disadvantaged. Others may view everyone as potentially limited in various ways by gender discourse. Some researcher tends to be concerned with pointing out power inequalities. Other research is more aligned with positioning everyone as potentially powerful or powerless at various points. Rather than attempting to predict what the next 10 years will bring, we instead will try to summarize what the most recent trends in the field have been, as it is likely that they will influence the next decade, even if they do not result in continuations of such work. There have been a number of recent publications, for example, which have foregrounded the role of women in the workplace, particularly the talk of and discourse about women as managers. Such research is important and timely. When women are put in a position of power, do they adopt traditional male ways of interacting or do they do something else? How can femininity be incorporated into management style and what discourses are emerging around women managers? A further trend involves research on gender and language in non-Western contexts. For example, in 2008, the British Association of Applied Linguistics Gender and Language Special Interest Group ran an event called Language and Gender in Africa Context. The event featured presentations on the language of marriage ceremonies in Botswana and the construction of gender discourse in the Cameroonian parliament. Other non-Western research includes Sadike 2003, who examined women's language in Morocco, and Malison and Charles 2007, who examined language and identity practice of black women in Appalachia, gender and language within the context of globalization, for example, Basnian 2007, the relationship between gender and sexuality in more detail, for example, Cameron and colleague 2003, research on gendered language use in young people, particularly young girls and women, for example, BISAC 2006. These recent forms of research show how far the field of language and gender has moved away from lack of observations of a peer group to consider a much broader definition of language and gender.
And finally, before you close this video, please take a minute to leave a comment about your experience with presentations. You can share your thoughts or ask questions in the comment section at the bottom of this lesson. Thank you so much.